Welcome to the only show bringing cops and the community together for some real talk and some real listening. This is uncut. This is uncensored. This is Black and Blue Live. Hey, welcome everybody to Black and Blue Live. How you guys doing out there? My name is Dale. I'm the host. That over there, can you see it? Where's my finger at? Over there, yeah. I always got this problem right there. There she is.
Right here.
That's Elizabeth. How you guys doing out there? I hope everybody's enjoying the show. Yes. Thank you. So how you doing, Liz? Oh, you know what?
How you doing?
You know what? We're going through a house remodel right now, and just yesterday I was breaking up tile. This whole week it's just crazy, and I'm not having fun. I wish I would have paid somebody to do it, but nonetheless we're doing it, and hey, it's gonna be beautiful. We'll invite you over as soon as we're done. So
I'm gonna need to come because I know I got a room. I know one of those tile
somewhere. Yeah, back here.
Maybe not in the street, down the street somewhere. Right?
Yes. So welcome to Black and Blue Live, everybody. We appreciate everybody for joining us here today. We're going to have a great conversation with some professionals about this phenomenon going on called Asian hate. Hate is terrible in all forms, regardless, but this phenomenon has been on the rise since 2020 for various reasons, and we'll talk about that. But first, Lizzie, have you ever had any Asian friends that have, what's going on, coworkers that have talked about what's going on right now?
I haven't had anyone recently discuss what's going on, but for me, a lot of my Asian friends it's always been a conversation. Unfortunately, it's been heightened with a lot of nasty rhetoric and irresponsible conversations and things that are being said. But
Yep.
I think that the thought that all of a sudden this phenomena was happening is very much a false narrative. There's always been discrimination and hateful things happening in the Asian community, as well as other communities of color. But now it's at the forefront because we have now people in power using hateful rhetoric, which is now increasing and feeding on paranoia and, truth be told, underlying racist and hateful actions, giving people an excuse to act a plum donkey, as my grandma would say. But yeah, so I would say growing up, it was very much a conversation with my peers. Now, as I'm older, it's not a conversation that I've had recently, but definitely aware of the issues.
Yeah.
How about you?
I've got some Asian friends as well, and we talk about that from time to time. But right now, you guys out there, we're going to bring on some Asian professionals, and are we back? We're back.
We're back.
Did I lose everybody? Technical difficulties, people. We are live. This is live, ladies and gentlemen. This is live, but we are back. I froze there, but we are back. Is everyone still back here? I hope everyone's back, because we are going to introduce, without any further ado, let's get our guest in here so everyone can talk to him. Why don't you take it away there, Lizzie?
All right. And so we are so excited to introduce our guests that are here today. I'd like to first bring on from Mountain View, California, Chief Chris Chung to join us today.
All right. Where is Chief Chung? Chief Chung there? Oh, no. Chief Chung. I'll get you.
He will join us in a second. We also have out of Los Angeles, California, journalist and commentator Amy Liu.
There's Chief Chung there. There's Chief Chung.
How you doing, sir? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And thank you for joining us.
Yeah, sorry about that. Typical 2021. The second you said we're bringing the guests in, all of a sudden my computer froze. So here I am. Hello, everybody. Technology. It's an honor to be here. My name's Chris Chung. I'm the police chief of the Mountain View Police Department out here in Northern California, otherwise known as the heart of Silicon Valley. And I've been doing this role for 4 months. I've been at Mountain View PD for 26 years. Kind of born and raised in the Bay Area. Policing is always something I've always wanted to do, and it's an awesome job, career. But happy to be here as a guest today.
All right, thank you
so much.
Thank you. Let's get back here. There you go.
All right.
Go ahead, Lizzie, take it away.
Our next guest will be a journalist and commentator out of Los Angeles County, Amy Liu.
Amy, are you there? Looks like she logged off there. So let's
log back in.
Yes,
also. All right.
Yes, we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live, ladies and gentlemen. Go ahead there, Liz, with our next.
This is an important topic. And so also we have all the way from the LBC, educator Vincent Puth.
Vincent. Oh my goodness, everyone froze up here.
Hey Vincent, can you hear us?
I can, but I don't know why it's freezing up. It's just one of those things where it's like it was working fine, like Chief said, but then once you guys start introducing us, it starts freezing on me. But I hope I'm hearing being heard right now. You guys good with me? Cool,
yeah,
cool. So hello everyone. Okay, cool. My name is Vincent Puth. I'm the activities director at Long Beach Poly High School, the Long Beach Poly High School with the most NFL players coming out of the high school. The same high school that Snoop Dogg, Cameron Diaz, and Billie Jean King graduated from. And of course, the high school, the flagship high school of Long Beach Unified, right in the middle of Little Cambodia town. Of Long Beach, California. So I'm very honored to be here. I'm the activities director there, working, consistently, just trying to make sure I keep up that spirit of the Jackrabbits of Long Beach Poly High School.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
All right, and next we have Jonathan Momino, a deputy out of Texas. Jonathan, would you join us? Hello.
Hi, am I loud enough?
Well, yes.
Oh, okay. How you doing? I'm Deputy Jonathan Momino. I'm with the Dare County Sheriff's Office, and I've been a deputy for the past 5 years. 6 years. I love it. I started at the jail. 2 years later, I transferred out to the streets while working East Patrol for the past 3 years. I love it. I want to trade it for the world. Every day is different, and that's what I love about it. I mean, you never know what you're gonna get. You never know what you're gonna expect.
Thank you so much for coming.
And finally, looks like Amy's back. It looks like Amy's back.
So, Amy, we're so excited to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Thank you for joining us, Amy Liu.
Yeah, so I don't know what happened there. It just froze all of a sudden, but I'm glad I'm back. So my name is Amy Liu, and I'm really honored and grateful to be here today to talk about Stop Asian Hate. And that's something that I feel deeply passionate about. And I've been a journalist for about 10 years now, and with various public, private, commercial, nonprofit organizations, news organizations. And throughout my entire career, I've been really passionate about raising visibility and being a voice for the voiceless, particularly for the Asian and Asian American community, which I feel are often marginalized, overlooked, or underserved. So that's something I feel very passionate about and very honored to be able to talk more about and to be able to infuse into my journalism career. Thanks for having me, and I'm really excited for this discussion.
All right, so here we are. We're back. There's everyone there. This was some technical difficulties, but we got through it, and we are still live. Everybody, we made it through. Thank you for joining us, everybody, on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. And we're going to have a great discussion here with everybody. We've already got some comments here on the side. Thank you, Michael Powell on Facebook, and Desmond Walker also on Facebook for chiming in. We're going to have some great conversations today. Thank you for joining us. First off, everyone introduced themselves, but no one gave us your ethnic background. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your ethnic background, everyone? We'll start one by one with Chief Chung, and we'll work our way around. Tell us a little bit about your ethnic background and your family. How many generations have been here in the U.S.?
Sure. So I'm a first-generation son of immigrants. My parents immigrated here from, originally they were from China, but they went to Taiwan shortly after the war. and then came here in the early 70s. I won't tell you exactly how old I am, but I'm getting up there in age. Being the first generation, English actually was not my first language. I speak Mandarin, conversational. Our grandparents kind of lived with us, as is common in many Asian households. Much to my parents' disappointment, I did not stick it out through Chinese school, so I can't read or write, but I can speak and understand Mandarin.
All right, thank you for joining us. Amy, tell everybody about your ethnic background and your family.
Yeah, so I am ethnically Chinese, but my parents are from Vietnam, so they're refugees of the Vietnam War. So my grandparents are from southern China in a province called Guangdong, and then they immigrated to Vietnam, where my parents were born, and then and when the Vietnam War happened, they were refugees of that war when they came over to the U.S. So I am first generation, and I stuck it out through Chinese school, so I'm able to speak Mandarin, Cantonese, and Chu Chao, which is another, or Teochew, that's another Chinese dialect. Yeah, so, but I don't really write and read that well, but luckily I am able to speak it. But my fiance, he makes fun of my Chinese.
All right, thank you for joining us here. Let me see if I can get the cursor back here. Here we go. And Vincent, tell everybody about your family and your ethnic background.
All right. So I'm a second generation Cambodian American. So my parents fled Cambodia during the refugee time. So they were refugees here during the Cambodian genocide that was happening over there. And born here, English is my first language. I am conversational with Khmer, which is the language of the Cambodian folks. And excuse the background, like they'll say, "Oh, what's going on in the war zone?" I'm in Long Beach. I'm at home, so you're gonna hear a little bit of the background. I'll try my best to kind of mute that out. But that's Long Beach, home of the largest Cambodian population outside of Cambodia. So that's unique in that I was born here in Long Beach, raised as a Long Beach person here throughout, but ethnically I'm Cambodian. I identify with a lot of the folks here who are Cambodian American as well. My family, honestly, we're probably on the fourth or fifth generation now, which is kind of insane considering that it felt like yesterday we were still kind of working on the first and second generation of our our siblings.
All right, thank you for joining us. And last but certainly not least, Deputy Jonathan Momino, go ahead and tell everybody about your family and your ethnic background.
So I'm a first generation Filipino. My dad and my mom are both Filipino. My dad actually joined the military, the U.S. Navy, at 22 years, and he met my mom in Guam, which is where I was born, and we moved to the U.S. And, my mom ended up getting her citizenship, and unfortunately, I'm not really fluent in Tagalog. I can only know the curse words. That's pretty much how I learned some of it. But as far as doing a regular conversation, I really can't. I actually can speak more Spanish than Tagalog, even though the languages are almost similar.
All right, curse words, huh? Love it,
You're
love
ahead of
it.
the game. You're still ahead of the game as far as I'm concerned. So I do want to follow up with that, and maybe Amy, you can speak to it, and Vincent next, and then if anyone else wants to weigh into that. With the diverse backgrounds, right? There is often this stereotype everyone assumes your ethnicity or your backgrounds. Do you think that has played into what your experience has been here in America in dealing with discrimination, or the assumption, especially when we're dealing with Asian hate recently, the discrimination and stuff, just being kind of, what I want to say, singled out, if you will, or automatically grouped into one category. What was your experience growing up with that? Because clearly this is a huge diverse journey for everyone here. So I don't know, Amy, you want to speak to that first, and then Vince and anyone else who wants to weigh into that, what that
Yeah.
impact has been.
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, I was thinking about this the other day. Growing up, fortunately, I grew up in the San Gabriel Valley area, which is a area in Southern California where there's a large majority of Asian population, particularly Chinese and some Vietnamese as well. In my area, San Gabriel Valley, but so growing up, I didn't have as much of that. But then as I grew older, I went to college, I learned about the history behind Asians in America. And then actually, I was on campus once and I was walking, and there were students visiting UCLA where I was attending school at the time. And then they were just like, Konnichiwa, you know? And then when I was studying abroad in Spain, for example, I was just walking down the street and then here I hear it again, Konnichiwa. And I'm just like, I don't, I mean, I love Japanese, you know, food and culture, but I'm not Japanese and I'm Chinese and I don't speak Japanese. So there's this assumption that there's all Asians are lumped together, and you know, and it's just like this huge monolith, but we're not. There's various. It's a very diverse community, from Japanese, Chinese to Cambodian, Filipino, Pacific Islanders. It's a huge, very, very diverse community, even within the AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander community. And often it just gets lumped together. And then even related to that is a model minority myth, which is that, oh, you know, all Asians are successful. They don't need help. They don't need resources. But within the community, there's a huge gap. There's a huge disparity gap between various groups of Asians and Asian Americans, from the wage gap. You know, certain Asian parts of the Asian groups of Asians earn more than others. You know, there's others that need way more resources and more education, whether it be education or funding resources in the community. And I think that that's just as important to bring to light.
Absolutely.
I'm sure Vince can speak to the educational part.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you, Amy, for bringing to light the diversity within the Asian culture or the Asian group. And it's funny how if you're looking at the big schemes of America, like who's here, who's immigrated to America, there's always that, you know, the concept of Orientals, right? The other, the Far East. And then you get the Asian folks who are like kind of like the other when you're describing mainstream American culture, because they're trying to include different, you know, folks who have immigrated to America. And then within the Asian culture, there's the other Asians, which is the Cambodians, the Southeast Asians, the Laotian, the Hmongs, the Vietnamese, and so on. That came at a different time. And I'm glad that Amy alluded to that, because the Asian folks who have immigrated to this country came in so many different waves. You're talking about, you know, building railroads in the mid 1800s to, you know, the Vietnam War to, you know, you can even say currently right now with stuff's going on with India and Burma. So there's different types of folks who are immigrating here, and with that comes different challenges. And with the Cambodian American experience, you get the challenges of being, you know, put in the same communities as Central Americans and Mexican Americans, you know, neighborhoods and African Americans here in Southern California and Long Beach, and you're fighting for the same resources, and you're refugees versus immigrants who are, you know, coming over with, you know, either skill sets or the ability to have jobs or, you know, get into a role in society that's already established in America. So then you get a lot of whole different experience. So in my own personal experience, I would say a lot of the Cambodian folks are really in line of just, you know, they're refugee immigrants trying to come to America and really just trying to fight with resources or find resources with the same immigrants who are here in America too, who are like recent ones. You know, it's not the same experience, I would say, as those who are, you know, who are Japanese Americans, who are like third generations, or Chinese Americans and so on. And that's pretty unique because, like Amy said, to the outside world, we're all Asians though. Right, we're all Asian, and I think one of the things that I remember growing up and hearing is that a lot of the Cambodian folks would get offended or mad when someone says, "Aren't you Chinese?" Or even in Spanish, where like Chinos, or, you know, those are the Chinos over there, and it wasn't even derogatory in the fact that they were just calling it Cambodian Chino. It was just like for them, the Spanish word for Asians was Chino, at least what they understood. But I remember a lot of Cambodians would just get upset, like, I'm not Chino, I'm Cambodian, fool, I'm different. And that would just be like, a whole different, experience in itself. And I think that's uniquely within certain groups of the Southeast Asian community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else want to jump in there? Either Jonathan or Chief Chung?
I guess the only thing I would add is you add that layer of how Hollywood portrays the roles that the roles that they get picked, right? The actors, actresses.
Yes.
They're all pretty much either a kung fu master, a villain, or a damsel in distress or whatever, and it's very much typecasted, and it really hasn't changed much over the last 50 or so years. And to Vincent and Amy's point, I can't think of anything right now where they've actually distinguished the variety of different ethnic differences among the diaspora. Big word for all the different types of cultures that are really represented.
Yeah. I was going to bring this up later. I'll jump in here real quick. I'm a big comic book buff, so I watch all the comic book movies and all that sort of stuff. And Marvel just introduced a new character that's going to have a new movie, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and he's the first Asian American, or at least Asian superhero that's going to be on the big screen. But nonetheless, he's still involved with martial arts, and that kind of delves into what you were talking about, Chief Chung, about certain stereotypes, certain kind of roles that Asians get in Hollywood. But then we got the crazy rich Asians that my wife loves that movie. She watches it like 45 times a month. So yeah, that's a great movie. Jonathan, did you want to add something real quick?
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm actually looking forward to that movie too.
Yeah.
I mean, that and Mortal Kombat, which just came out. I mean, yeah, everyone's looking forward to it, but like what she said, it's a stereotypical Asian American male, female in a lead doing martial arts, and what else is new? You got to put it in something different. But I mean, it's Hollywood. I mean, they'll do whatever to make money, and you can't put Jackie Chan or Jet Li in a dramatic lead. Who will watch that?
Right. I think I would, but well, maybe not now because they're a little long in the tooth now. Yeah. But
I think it's a really interesting point. I think kung fu is that's like Chief Chung said, the typecast, or it's the crazy rich Asian, another typecast. But I think that slowly, hopefully, I mean, like, my hope is that, like, I think that it's starting to pave the way for more visibility, at least more visibility of Asians versus zero. And not only that, but I think another aspect of that is Asian males in particular. I studied this extensively in college. Has historically been emasculated by media, by American media, and I think that at least that is not happening.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. All right.
But definitely there needs to be a lot more way to go as far as representation in media.
Absolutely. And hopefully this show has a little bit about it. Go ahead, Lizzie.
So do you all think, and maybe Chief Chung and Jonathan and anyone else that wants to weigh in, the lack of representation, whether it be in media or typecasted representation, and even in schools, right? Because I can count on my fingers and have fingers left over of teachers that look like me, or people in power that look like me, that I could look up to and say, that's who I want to be. Do you think that has added to the dehumanization or the disregard of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders? Do you think that has had an effect because of the lack of representation, or what we do get basically gives a perception of weakness, or again, the model minority type of scenario that also yields to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and being the son of immigrants, I think, my parents looking back, they wholeheartedly believed the model minority myth. It was like how I was raised, right? Because their mantra was like, you need to study to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. And I'm like, I suck at math. I can't do any of that stuff, right? But it's true. I think the biggest impact is the impact on our youth, right? Because just to your point, Lizzie, if you're a kid and you don't see certain role models in a variety of positions or professions or careers, your imagination kind of stops at that point, right? And I remember doing a quick search on how many Asian police chiefs there are in the state of California. I think the number is 12. Now I don't know how many police departments are in California, but there's a lot, right? And I know coming into this profession that it was not exactly, I could go to all these conferences and just really never see another Asian person for the first half of my career. But that's changed a lot over time. And that's a good thing, right? And I think that same could be said of a lot of other different career tracks. Obviously, you can probably find a dime a dozen, right, in those professions I named, right? Lawyer, doctor, engineer. But my hope is that media and Hollywood really starts to highlight Asians in roles that are non-traditional, and really to showcase to the kids that you can really be anything you want. Don't sell yourself short.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, I can't say that.
Right? Yeah, just like what he was saying. Like when I was in high school, I was really horrible at math. I was good at everything else but math, and I was actually made fun of about that. I was pressured into doing stuff like the typical Asian, doctor, lawyer, uh, scientist. I didn't want to do any of that because it wasn't exciting. I didn't want to do a desk job doing 9 to 5. I wanted to do something that was, that was different, that was exciting, and being a cop was one of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. All right, so we're here today. We're discussing, the uh, Asian hate phenomenon that's going on right now, the acts of violence and other crimes that are going on within the not within but to the Asian community. Have any of you ever experienced any sort of discrimination yourselves personally, or anyone in your family? We could start with you, Amy. Has anyone ever displayed any sorts of discrimination, any hate towards you or anyone you know?
I think probably. I mean, I'm sure it has happened to me with people who have maybe an unconscious bias in their head when they're talking to me or when they're interacting with me, and that's very unfortunate. But as far as actual hate crimes, fortunately, that hasn't happened to me. Fortunately, I mean, I have my whistle and everything. I carry it with me everywhere. But fortunately, that hasn't happened to me personally. However, I have had various instances with people, even in my community, even mutual friends. For example, one of my friends, her husband was just walking down the street when a person just literally came up and with an axe and just wanted to chop him or something. Yeah, literally down the street from where I live. Just
Wow.
just a city away. She's just walking down the street, and then all of a sudden, just walking while Asian, I suppose, just came up with an axe and wanted to, attack him, and for no reason. And this just happened very recently, maybe a few weeks ago, and I was just shocked. And then just across the street from where I live, a supermarket. I live across the street from a supermarket. Apparently, there was a elderly Asian couple who were being targeted. There were these fraudsters who approached them and were like, "Oh, hey, we're from the government and wanted information or money or something like that." And then they refused, and then they got beat up. Yeah, and it's just very unfortunate. And this happened several weeks ago as well. And I'm just really, I mean, I'm hearing instances about hate incidents or even and hate crimes on almost a daily basis now. And even on social media, when I'm scrolling down, I hear instances of another elderly woman being beat up, being or being attacked, targeted, and it's just yeah, every time like I said, every time I scroll on social media, it's a different incident or different hate crime happening, and it's getting to be it's getting to be very to a breaking point. It's really heavy stuff, and I really feel that shows like this or an education and more discussions about it and or to raise awareness about this happening is so important.
Yeah.
And if I could jump in as well, Amy, I think for all my buddies and my boys watching now and listening to this, they're gonna be really grateful that I'm gonna say this. They're gonna agree on that fact that Asian hate is probably, like Amy mentioned, that it's probably on a daily basis. It's probably being highlighted more because it's been with the social media world, with how we're technology, we're able to see it more. But we would say in the Cambodian American experience, it's nothing new. It's been something that we experienced, with racialized gang violence, in the early 90s. I went to the mid 2000s. A lot of those, racialized hate crimes. And come on, we got a history of that, from the Chinese Exclusion Act to all the stuff that has gone on a national scale level. Asian hate crime has been, a big part of the American, growth process. And it's not new. I think what's new is the documentation of what's going on, and is being publicized and is being put out there. And I would say hate crime and Asian hate crime in the past was probably more of the hate crime of, we don't understand who you folks are. Y'all Asian folks coming from what part of the world? Like, are you guys all Chinese? Are you guys all Japanese? We don't know. You're the other. So there's gonna be a hate crime of like, you're unknown to us. Whereas I think the Asian hate crime now is the perception of what we think you are, because words matter. When folks are in the authority figure and it's on a national level using words like kung flu or China virus and purposely saying those things, there's folks out there that don't know how to decipher. Like, they're talking about, on a political scale, on an international scale, or they're talking about, the rhetoric is being used, for political gains. They're just simplifying, saying it's like, well, first we didn't know of the other Asians. Now we're going to say this is what we understand Asian people as are, and then they're just gonna do hate crime based on that perception of like, you guys are responsible for this pandemic. And I think that's like something that we really got to put on the forefront of what's going on and why we're even talking about this. We just recently, just yesterday, I don't know if you guys heard, there was a elderly Asian man in Harlem that was beat because he was walking with a cart collecting cans, and he's on life support right now, and he just immigrated 2 years ago. Now, in the past, keeping it real, he would be just another man walking by with an unfortunate situation. But somebody who decided to commit a crime and then directed because he was an Asian man, somebody kind of put that, 2 and 2 together, saying like, you might be responsible for all the stuff that's been going on in our society, so I'm going to commit this crime against you now. And I would say that is, the discussion that I hope that we can definitely go on towards.
Yeah. Yep. And I know Chief Chung and Jonathan, you guys are in law enforcement, so you guys might have a different feeling, a different response to those sorts of things. But you guys are human too, and that's what this show is really about, also humanizing the badge. So if these sort of things happen to you off duty as well as on duty, could you guys speak to that? We'll start with you, Jonathan. Go ahead.
It's not, to be honest, I haven't really experienced it that much. Maybe because I'm in maybe in Texas, we're a little more tolerant, but I know it's a lot more prevalent in the East Coast as well as the West Coast. But like every time I see something regarding old elderly Asian person, it just breaks my heart, because I picture it as if it's my mom or my dad, because they can't.
Yep.
They're old, but I mean they can't defend themselves. It's heartbreaking. I always picture my mom or my dad in that position, like that's somebody else's loved one, and it just breaks my heart every time I see it, because it's too like what Vincent said 2 years ago. It would just be another person minding his own business, but now because of the coronavirus, now because of the crime rates against Asians are steadily rising, everyone knows. It's social media is putting all this stuff on blast, and it breaks my heart. It really does.
Yeah, absolutely. And before you jump in there, Chief Chung, we're talking about, Jonathan brought up different coasts and where these things are rising. I want to bring up a little something here that I have, some statistics here. Let's see if I could bring this up here with all of us there. There we go. Let me actually just bring it to the forefront there. So this is a study that the Cal State University San Bernardino released, and these are reports of Asian hate crimes within 2019 and 2020. I know now we're in 2020, and all those stats have not been calculated and tabulated yet in 2021. But you see here in 2019, New York City had, this is reported now, not necessarily all of them, but New York only had 3 reported hate crimes against Asians, and in 2020 it rose to 28. LA, it went from 7 to 15. Chicago stayed the same at 2. I would venture to say there would probably be a lot more than all these that have been reported here. What is your thought on that, Chief Chung? Have these rates actually risen in your area up in the Bay?
They have increased, and it's an interesting quandary. I think they've always been there, probably grossly underreported. And then you have a dynamic now where the media is probably covering it a lot more, right? And so it's kind of being more of the national narrative. And I know, speaking from the Chinese community, and I don't know if it's similar in other Asian communities, but growing up, there was something that culturally, it was almost like, don't rock the boat, right? Don't be a trouble to other people. And so, when that's kind of ingrained in the culture, and then you add another layer, I know, immigrants from like China who have a government that is communist, and the police department there works for the government. So there's going to be an inherent level of distrust that if something were to happen to you here and you're an immigrant and you don't speak English, the odds of you reaching out to American law enforcement really starts to drop. So that's why I know, at least in our department, we try do a lot of things in bilingual outreach, but really to educate the community and say, like, you're not going to be a trouble to us, to try to break through those cultural barriers, because we want people to feel safe.
Do you feel
Absolutely.
that more departments should be taking initiative to do that? I know a lot of times we focus on um, our undocumented Latino um, communities, because a lot of times they are terrified of law enforcement. But and for me, I'm being educated because I'm like, I didn't even think about that for our Asian communities and maybe the stigmas or what the relationship is with law enforcement there. Is that something that you would say law enforcement needs to be more intentional on doing? Or does it need to go beyond law enforcement? Like Amy has said, do we need to say teachers and other people need to be more intentional in reaching out to provide resources?
Yeah, I certainly think it wouldn't hurt, for that intentionality to really have a concerted effort to outreach into those communities. I mean, nothing at all against the Latino community, but typically, like in California, what you see is bilingual products are produced in English and Spanish, right? Or you call any customer service line, press 1 for Spanish and or English. But yet, like at least in my community, it's almost 30% Asian, right? But then going back to what we talked about earlier, which dialect or language do you speak? It's not as easy, because at least in the South American Latin communities, most speak Spanish, but just different kind of dialects. But for the most part, you can kind of understand each other if you're from different Latin American countries. Asian, very different, right? So so that's a huge challenge, and I think for at least for law enforcement, that's where it helps to have officers who speak the language and understand the culture and can break right through those cultural barriers and speak to someone in their native language, and then be the face of a connection to American justice.
Wow. I wanted to make sure I got this in too. I can't stress the importance and how I support more diversity in law enforcement. Whether it be like any people, any person of color. I just feel that is so important to have, whether it be African American, Latinx American, Asian American. I think it's so important to have diversity within law enforcement. to be an ally and liaison to the community, especially what Chief was saying, like a face. And that, I think, definitely breaks through the barriers, the cultural barriers, particularly in addition to language.
And I think if I can add on to this part, I really appreciate, hearing that you folks are ready to, to continue to, communicate more and reach out to the communities. Because one of the things I think that we also have to touch upon is within the Asian American communities, that's that, you guys alluded to the model minority, stereotype that's going on. There's also that if you're involving authority figures, you must have done something to kind of incite this as well. So if something has happened to you, it's probably better to just kind of keep it inside, keep it within the family, the community, and try to deal with it in-house versus involving authority figures, because now you're bringing unwanted attention, all this other stuff that's coming along with it. And I think when the education piece comes in and teaching folks that, hey, these are hate crimes that should not occur to you at all, like 100%.
Yes.
Like you did nothing wrong. You're just walking down the streets, and yes, that person may be of, mentally ill, or they may be coming from a personal space of, something that they're trying to deal with. And sometimes, that model myth minority says, well, it was just a bad situation. I was in a bad place at the wrong time, and I remember, hearing that from my grandmother when she was like, doing the same thing, collecting cans, pushing a cart, saying like, oh, sometimes when somebody do something wrong, the Buddhist way is to forgive and move on, right? And educating folks, especially within the Asian American community, saying like, if they're, attacking elders, maybe we should teach the elders like this is something that you should do. Reach out to the police officers, and seek assistance. On the social media end, you got the youth then who's popping off saying, oh, I wish they would do that to my grandma. I'll show them what's going on. And that's not the way. It's not, as clean as like, oh, yeah, I'm going to retaliate because I'm not that type of Asian. Trust me. Versus that, oh, no, we're not going to go to the authority figure because we don't want to bring attention. There's that middle ground that needs to be taught, which is like, hey, the authority figures, the police are here to help us, and you're not doing anything wrong. So if something like this happened, you need to report it right away so that you can help, stop this before it starts to spread and continue to grow.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. So what do we think is the catalyst to all this recent Asian hate going on today, which really started in 2020? I showed you those stats, in some cases doubling from 2019. What do we think is the catalyst to all this sort of thing happening? You want to jump in there, Amy?
What do you mean by catalyst?
What do you think is the impetus? How did all this start? This more Asian hate than was, say, in 2019 and before that. I know we got more that's being reported, but we all know that there's more Asian hate that's going on. Why do we think that is?
Oh, I see. Yeah, I think that there was always a long history of racism, as Vincent had mentioned earlier, which started from the Page Act from several hundred years ago, which was the first immigration law that barred other people from other nations from immigrating. And that was actually against Chinese women, because they were deemed immoral. So that was actually the first immigration law. And actually, I was looking up at the statistics too. Women report hate incidents 2.3 times more than men, according to the Stop AAPI Hate report that they had released in March. So I think I'm getting to the impetus part, but as far as the long history of that, and including the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, which then excluded Chinese men. So it's like, okay, first the women and then the men. And then in addition to that, during the Cold War, they actually tested the DNA of Chinese people of Chinese descent to prove the kinship with family, because that was the only way that they could immigrate to the US at that time, because they were afraid of communism with the Chinese. So I think that there's this long history of racism against people of Asian descent in America. Oh yeah, that's not to mention there's a massacre in 1871 in Los Angeles, where 17 Chinese men and boys were massacred. And I actually was listening to a congressional hearing recently, and a historian said that that was actually the largest mass lynching in American history. And so all of this is to say that there needs to be more education about the history of Asians and Asian Americans in the US and this long history of racism, which has been exacerbated by the coronavirus pandemic because of the scapegoating. You know, there's this otherizing, the scapegoating of people of Asian descent in America. And I think that speaks to it, that really exacerbates that scapegoating from people in power, unfortunately, in large part, but not only, but in large part to the last administration and some of those people in power, they have really used terms that racialized, otherized, and scapegoated people of Chinese descent or even just China, blaming them for the coronavirus, you know, for spreading it. And then it just gets in this long history of racism just gets bubbled up, and then it just exacerbated, and it just kind of came to light. And it was like a watershed moment, I think, when the Atlanta area shootings, when three spas, Asian spas, essentially were targeted, and 8 people died, and 6 were Asian women. So I think that that was kind of a watershed moment where it was like, oh my gosh, we really need to do something, you know, because there's just this violence and brutality against people of Asian descent here in America. And I think that more and more people are hearing about it, and more and more people are thinking, wow, something needs to be done here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You want to jump in there, Jonathan? You got anything to say? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lizzie.
Sorry, if I can, I just want to speak to what Amy was saying too, in terms of the history. And I think a lot of times there's a huge disservice to making it just because of the coronavirus. This is happening, where in fact America is steeped in history of racism and genocide and all of these things, right? And I love America, but we got issues, right? And so when you look at that and the conversations, and if you look at the bill that was recently passed, you had one of the senators say, well, I don't want my speech regulated, because free speech is free speech. But truth be told, speech has power, right? And so as Vincent had said earlier, and things like that, the power of the speech really fuels people. Like you look at Hitler, he used his speech to fuel a nation, you know, towards hate and things like that. And so just agreeing with what Amy is saying, when you're looking at the history of it, it's no surprise that with the right fire or the right fuel to the fire, we see now the flame burning, or like how we in California have the forest fires every year. Give the right igniter, we're going to see this happen within the communities. And it is upon us to really begin to correct it and deal with the dry wood. We got to get out the rot, because otherwise I think it's going to be cyclic, or we'll see it continue to happen, and playing off of the stigmas or culture, or kind of the, I guess, ingrained behaviors that people of color often have. And it ends up re-victimizing us, not because we want to, but because we haven't dealt with these issues, and almost taking advantage of keep family business in the house, is how we say it growing up, where it's the issue of honor, or what did you do to make this happen, or things like that. Do you find it hard when you all are working in various communities to get people to come out or to talk about it, or overcome that hurdle of stigma or shame? Like, what do you find that happening even now when dealing with maybe victims of hate crimes, or those who are trying to overcome adversity, maybe not a reported hate crime?
Go ahead, Chief Sean. What do you think?
Yeah, we've had an increase, but anecdotally, I think in the back of my mind, I'm pretty sure that there's more, right? And we have a downtown here in Mountain View, which is kind of an international, all sorts of different restaurants from all across the globe. And I went in and talked to all the different shop owners, Asian backgrounds, and they would tell me stories about people who would come in, try to shop with something, and then, when they were confronted, here come the racial epithets. But that's not reported, right? And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about, them not wanting to cause trouble for the police department or bring dishonor on the family. And there's so many layers that come to this. And it is a struggle. I think it's going to be incumbent upon the police departments to really outreach to the Asian communities and, again, with officers that may ideally that speak the language, because we can't help if we don't know, right? And so that's the struggle. But also, I think we need allies and advocates from within the community and throughout the community to partner up with that. And you all know, especially the ones in law enforcement, we can't do this alone, right? Every single issue we've ever dealt with in law enforcement has always been in partnership with the community.
Absolutely. Jonathan, is there a large Asian community down there where you're at in Texas? And if so, how are you in your department helping out with these Asian hate crimes that is happening down there?
Well, I just want to go back to those statistics. I forgot to mention that there was one instance of a hate crime being at a noodle restaurant here in San Antonio. It was actually hit the mainstream. The restaurant was vandalized with racial epithets, telling you to go back to China. Yet the guy is the owner is Vietnamese, and it goes back to you know general what you said, the catalyst is social media. People with power are fear mongering everyone, and with that influence, they think that that's the right thing to do, which is terrorize us and put it on blast all on social media. Social media is the main thing that's really causing all this hate against us, because they only put the wrong thing and people just ride with it. Now
Yeah.
going back to your question in regards to uh, us taking a stance and bridging that gap between us and Asian American community. Well, my department, we have a liaison for every different actually every different ethnicity. We have a Muslim liaison. We have an Asian American liaison. It's not me though. I'll probably really look into that. But and what she said, there is definitely a barrier between us and the community, because where I'm from in Texas, the majority of the community is Hispanic, and some of them have a hard time speaking English, and it's hard for them to open up to us because some of them they're I don't want to they didn't come here legally, and they're in fear of getting deported. And so, but I mean, it puts us in a rock and a hard place trying to help them out. And I really do, like, I really want to make a difference out here.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a comment here. Send this up here. So, Elise Klauser on Facebook asked, what advice would you share with AAPI's teens and youth dealing with hate? I know, Vincent, you're a high school educator.
Yeah.
Why don't you start off with that?
All right. Yeah, I saw that. I'm itching to respond to that. One of the things I would say that I'm grateful that Chief brought this when you mentioned about working with allies and creating a community, and Jonathan talked about creating a community with the police departments and the community out there, the folks that you guys are serving. The youth out there, they're amazing, right? Like if you guys get a chance to sit there and talk to our youth of all backgrounds, because of the pandemic, you actually see the best of this new generation. They have grit. They've learned perseverance. This whole thing that we're dealing with in the world, you'll see that the youth are coming out to shine. One of the advice I would say is, hey, don't stop building your allies. Don't stop building your community, because the youth are the first group that will. And like Jonathan mentioned, social media, they're hooked on it. They control that, and sometimes it can be used for the bad, and sometimes it can be used for the good. And one of the things that they know is they can really build that social media connection and network, and then they do it face to face with each other, and challenge them. I would say, hey, if you're dealing with crimes with the AAPI community, don't hesitate to reach out to your classmates, your friends, your community, your soccer team, and just say, hey, how can we find a way to overcome this? How can we teach each other that this is not what we stand for? One of the things that the youth will tell you is they don't hesitate to call out what's wrong. They won't. They'll tell you right in the face, this is not what we experience, what we see in our community, and we will say this is not correct. And tell them, if you have friends who are of a different group and is willing to be your ally, continue to hold on to that, because that's something that I think the youth can teach us adults, and that we can all come together and find a way to connect with one another. Because if you go into a classroom, and I talk to Dale about this all the time, if you come into a classroom, you talk to the kids, what's going on, what are the issues, they can give you 1,000 things that's going wrong with this world. And then you ask them, what are you guys, are doing to resolve it? They can give you 1,000 responses that they can come back with and say, this is what we're doing. And I would give that advice, is to continue building your allies, continue networking with another, and lean on one another for support.
Absolutely. Yeah, Chief Chung, what do you think about that as well? I know Vincent was talking about he appreciate what you said about that. What do you think about what he's bringing up as far as the youth in this question here by Ms. Clouser?
Rock solid. It's the only thing I would add would be, with social media, the thing we got to watch out for. And I have 4 kids that are teenagers, so I'm saying almost responding as a father at this point. But it's like, we have to also educate the teens that you're not going to solve the majority of these issues over social media, right? You're going to communicate it, but what I see online is typically they're shouting past each other, right? So the real takeaway for this generation is create the spaces for dialogue. Create, and it's hard because we got this pandemic, but we're almost coming out of it, whether it's through the schools, it's through civic programs or whatever, but we got to create these opportunities for kids, teens, anyone who don't look like each other to get in the same space and to learn and listen from each other, right? Because otherwise we're left with what's filled out. Everything you see on social media, which we know is always not the greatest. And then you got Hollywood, right? And now it's the typecasting thing all over again. So we got to break out of that. And as a society, it's almost like we've lost the fabric of society. We're all these bunch of these individuals trapped in our houses. So we got to rebuild all those bonds. But the only way that's going to happen is if we put the phones down and actually look at each other and actually talk to people that don't look like each other, because we all have different experiences growing up here in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me get another comment here from a Vivi V on Facebook. She says, silence is just as bad as hate and injustices. If we stay quiet, we give it power. We need to speak up and refuse to accept it. What do you think about that comment there, Amy?
Yeah, that's really well put and well said. Thank you, Vivi. Yeah, I was gonna say, it came to my mind that there's also bystander training, that's available out there. There's a free one available that's offered it's called Hollaback, I believe, and it's I saw it first with a tweet from the Asian Americans Advancing Justice, who have been really active as far as advocating for the Asian community and really standing up against the hate. But then there's also bystander intervention and bystander training that's free and available to the public and the community. And so I think that in addition to the actual AAPI community speaking up, I think that there's that allyship that could also really help, as if there's a bystander, if you're a bystander to hate, then speak up or do something about it, or even just speaking up in general and being an ally, I think is really helpful. Because I did see there are several instances recently where someone was being attacked outside of the door. And I think some of the hotel workers were just literally just watching as the person was getting attacked. And then fortunately, I saw another recent incident where somebody actually stepped in. So yeah, I think that that's really important. That community building, that allyship, I think is great. And being a bystander, in addition to the actual AAPI community standing up and not being silent.
Yeah. I would say that being bystanders and just standing around watching is kind of what our society has degraded down to. Everyone's just sitting and watching. They pull out their phones, which in some instances is a good thing. Without a lot of these recorded incidents, a lot of these things wouldn't have gone public. Namely, George Floyd and those sorts of things like that. So it is what it is. It's the society we're in nowadays. Let me piggyback on what I just said about George Floyd and all the things that we had happen in 2020. We just had that verdict, but back in 2020 with the BLM protests based on the George Floyd incident, Breonna Taylor, and all those other incidents that happened, I know the Asian community was really backing what happened with BLM. A lot of, at least that's the feeling that I got. But now, is there a sense of, I know, Vince, you were saying that before, there's a sense with this Asian hate because a lot of these incidents are happening with the suspects being African American, that maybe you feel betrayed. What do you think about that, Vince?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that, I definitely want to bring to the table is when I talk to my friends, when I talk to, my buddies who are part of the AAPI community, and they, they're all coming from all walks of life. One of the things that's being brought up is that a lot of the Asian youth were strong advocates of BLM, strong advocates and vocal advocates, and continue to be supporters of that. And I think it really caught a lot of the Asian youth by surprise to see the Asian elders being attacked by a large amount, at least in the videos of big cities of Chicago, New York, and in the Bay Area, by African Americans as the perpetrators. So it was like, what do we do? Like, what do we do? And I think it's shown in social media where, like, there's an Instagram account called Jackfruit, and they post a lot of different videos that sometimes it's sensationalism, sometimes it's just to kind of educate folks, and they make it a point to say we're not going to tolerate racism with racism. When folks say, oh, see, this is why we don't want to support BLM, and then they go even further than that, and then the moderators then will have to delete it. But I think as a community, there's that healing that still needs to be done. And but on the flip side, what Amy was talking about, continuing the allyship, there's a lot of prominent folks out there who are part of the Black community who stepped up and said, I'm going to be a voice for it. I mean, it could be someone who's like just a local community person who's speaking out. You had Dame Lilliard, who wore a pre-game shirt, "Stop Asian Hate," Portland Trailblazer guard. You even had Megan Thee Stallion, speak out against it. The youth are encouraged by that when they see folks, of the African American community, stepping in and helping out. And I think, that's really powerful, and continuing, like, two different messages doesn't necessarily mean that they're, separate from one another. Stopping Asian hate doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stop supporting, folks who are trying to, get equal rights and, and the livelihoods of African Americans in the community. So I think that's powerful, and the allyship is still continuing. But it's hard work because, on a one-on-one basis in the community, there's a lot of stuff that still needs to be built because of social media, because of everything that's being recorded. You got to have that real dialect that Chief mentioned. Like, folks need to sit down and say, well, what's really going on? How can we find a way to build our community back?
Absolutely. Appreciate that. So where do we go from here? I know there's a bill that was just passed. Let me bring that up, actually, so we can talk about that real quick. Give me a second here. There we go. So this bill just recently breezed through the Senate here, and it's an Stop Asian Hate bill, hate crime bill, that was passed through the Senate. What do you guys think about that? What do we think the need for this is? An Asian hate crime bill. What do you think about that, Chief Chung?
Wrong button. Sorry, trying to unmute. It's certainly not going to hurt, and I think it's good to kind of keep, bills like that keep the discussion in the narrative, right? And I think what's the path forward for all of this is continued discussions more on a local community level, right? Because the federal legislation will come and go, and at the end of the day, this would be terrible if the bill gets passed and nothing really changes. So to me, it's a start, but really the path forward relies on all of us in whatever communities we're in, to take a leadership role in having these discussions and meeting different groups, people that don't look like each other, to have these sometimes even difficult conversations to go forward and break down the barriers. Because I know, maybe speaking for the Chinese community, it's pretty insular, right? You kind of stick to yourself, and that's why you have kind of like the Chinatowns, right? And there's some good attributes come from that, but really, the silver lining in a lot of this is for the AAPI community to kind of branch out and to get to know that there's others in society, in the communities that they live in, that are allies. But that's not going to happen if we don't kind of reach out and talk to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me ask everyone else here on the panel real quick. Playing devil's advocate, I hear, what is the need for an Asian hate crime bill? What is the need for any hate crime bill? These are the sorts of things that I hear, that a crime is a crime. Why do we need an Asian hate crime bill? What do you think about that, Amy?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, Dale. I was looking at in particular that study, that chart that you put up earlier from the Center for Study of Hate and Extremism from CSU-SB. If the statistics say that overall nationwide anti-Asian hate crime surged 149%, right? But then overall hate crime dropped 7% in 2020. So
Wow.
it's like, okay, so and then what was astounding to me was New York City 833% increase. Okay, in anti-Asian hate crime. So I that was astounding to me, that statistic. And so while all these other groups, hate crimes against all these other groups have dropped, the hate crimes against Asian people of Asian descent significantly rose by 3 digits. So that tells me that was why that bill was initially created and pushed. As far as the impetus with this alarming uptick, alarming rise, acting as the impetus for a hate crime bill like this. And then in addition to that, all the other recent events, including leading throughout the hate crimes throughout the pandemic, leading up to the Atlanta area spa shootings,
Yep.
and then the passage of the bill this past week.
Yeah. And Jonathan, go ahead, Amy. We got none but time. Go ahead.
I'll wait for the others. I'll piggyback on what the others say.
All right, Jonathan. Hey, real quick, as a law enforcement officer, why don't you piggyback, answer that question as well? What do you think is the need for any hate crime bill, especially this Asian hate crime bill?
That's come from my position. It's kind of hard, kind of a hard question to answer. Being on the streets for 3 years, I've seen every people from different races being discriminated, and it's hard to answer. And it doesn't really need to take we don't need to have a COVID-19 to have an Asian hate bill to be passed. That should have been done a long time ago, and not just for us, it's for people of all colors.
I agree. Bring it back here. All right.
Can I piggyback off of what Jonathan said, and even with Amy, and kind of to our conversation earlier too, in regards to what is being reported versus what isn't? Because I think what we're seeing now is it's now televised, right? The revolution is now televised. Things are being filmed, so they're being brought to the forefront. I don't know if someone hadn't caught what happened to so many of the victims who were beaten, right? If someone hadn't filmed it, if in fact they would have talked about it. And I also think it comes down to classification as to what exactly is considered a hate crime, or what does America want to consider a hate crime. For me, George Floyd was a hate crime, but I don't think it got stated as that. I think it got stated as police injustice or misconduct. And so I think too, we're also having to deal with the nuances of statistics, and what meets a legislative crime or whatever else, and things like that. And so I think we also have to take that when we're having these conversations and presenting these things, and educate in that too, because even within the communities there are these long-standing, if you will, head bumps, right? There are these things that are already going on within the communities of color that are already existent, but given the right film roll, or given the right button, I'll use this to make this the issue and focus the issue, when in fact the fire started, up in Congress, or the fire started up in here, and you use these situations to magnify something that's been long going, or long standing, instead of taking ownership for the systemic and the institutionalized policies and laws that were in place to continue to perpetuate this cyclic devastation to the communities of color, regardless of how we see it. So I think I totally agree, but I think that it's important to bring that narrative in there too, that there are some things, not making it right, there are some things that are existent that are playing off of those things, which causes these things to blow up. But now someone took a camera and said, I'm going to scapegoat this and make this the issue, or I'm going to point the finger this way, instead of dealing with the issue. And a lot of times people take it personal instead of dealing with policy. And it's not about personal, it's policy, which then breeds the personal areas and things like that. But I definitely agree that as an allyship, and the other things are definitely in place, but I don't think we can actually say that these things happen without the other. I don't think the strings can be disattached. I don't know, maybe you all see it a little different. That's just kind of my perception on that. The strings are still attached, even though given the camera roll, they may point it this way, but they're still, the cameraman is still attached to the camera. I guess that's the best way I can say that.
If I could jump in real quick, because I really love how you brought that to light, Lizzie. Laws are passed as guidelines for law-abiding citizens, right? And so it's like law-abiding citizens going to look at that and say, okay, now I know, what the rules are. The education, I'm glad I'm using that word because I'm the educator here, right? The education of why that law exists is important to all stakeholders to say, okay, now this is why we still have that, why we have that law. So in passing a bill that, potentially can be a national law saying, Asian hate crime is going to be a federal offense, whatever, the details are, it's teaching our community that this is real, because there's going to be folks out there who says, this doesn't exist. I don't think this is real in my community. I don't know if this is really, something of an issue that we need to, have on a national forefront. But in doing so, we're teaching, everyone, all stakeholders, saying like, look, this is a real thing, and we need to address that on a national scale. And I think that's a powerful message, from our government to say, we're going to say this is, a real life situation. The stats don't lie when it comes to Asian hate crime.
Yeah, and I think piggyback off that, yeah, definitely well said, Vincent. To piggyback off that is that this nation has had a history of laws, legislation that has barred and otherized people of Asian descent, and in addition to other people of color, but particularly with and I didn't even mention the alien land laws in Washington and California that barred people of Asian descent from owning land. There's been a history of all these laws that really just that were discriminatory, that barred people of Asian descent from being a part of this society. But now that there's this piece of legislation, the COVID-19 hate crimes bill, I think that it kind of, I want, for lack of a better word, just is progress in a sense that it is a piece of legislation to at least advocate for this community, for that has had a history of legislation that hasn't really been on their side, that has really disfavored them. And so, although I don't think that this is the only solution, I think that it is progress in that sense. And not to mention, I think one of the experts, the policy experts from Stop AAPI Hate, told me that hate crimes is just a percentage of the racism that's against people of Asian descent. It's just it's hate crimes is not the only thing. There's other incidents. As a matter of fact, she told me that there's a large percentage that are not hate crimes, but incidents, hate reports, hate incidents, racism. So, and that includes discriminatory language. Let me just bring up the percentage. 68.1% is verbal harassment, 20% shunning, and then 11% physical assault. So that just tells you that it's not just hate crimes, it's hate incidents. And then she alluded to another thing too, which is education is a huge part of it. Bringing a policy and education policy to incorporate education about the history of people of color, of Asians in America. And in addition to that, policy as far as community building and community liaisonship. So I think that that's what can really address not only hate crimes, but also those hate incidents that make up a large portion of the racism.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Love that. So bottom line is we all got to live here together, right? So let's work together and make sure that we're all happy and prosperous. And that's what the U.S. is all about, this great melting pot of ours. We're all living here together. Let's work towards a better future. Whatever race we are, whatever color we are, ethnic background, religious, sexual orientation, all of that. That's what we're about here at Black and Blue. So I just wanted to get that point forward. So as we wrap this up here, let's get some closing statements from each of you. What do you want to leave our audience with here as we say goodbye to one another? Jonathan, we'll let you start off here.
Well, I just want to say that I became a police officer because I want to do the right thing. I wanted to change minds of people in the community. I wanted to bridge that gap. I want to bring that special meaning to community policing. I always tell people in the community, I'm a minority just like you. We might not look the same, but I can relate to you in so many other ways you can never imagine. And I just want to make a difference in the kids, and make sure it's hard to put in words with what's going on right now, and everything going on with people with crimes against Asian Americans. It took a toll on me, to be honest, and I needed to take time off and get my mind right. But I'm moving forward, and try to be a positive influence to everyone I see out on the streets.
Appreciate that. Glad you shared that with us. And like that shirt, first of all. Not too keen on the hat, but love the shirt. Just want to let you know that. L.A. All right, go ahead, Vince. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, one of the things that I'm gonna use a little silly sports analogy here. I'm a diehard Lakers fan, just like Dale. And when we were going through those rough years, I think Dale and I went to a game where we had our starting guys as Lonzo and I forget who, Dale. I forgot. We were blown out by 20 points, and our highlight of the game was just getting the popcorns and the drinks and taking pictures with each other. But then one of the silly analogy that I want to use is that as a Lakers fan, we were so used to being great. We said to each other, we'll be back. We're going to get there again. And I feel that's exactly how we should feel as our community, wherever we're at, in this great country that we're in. There's going to be bumps in the roads. There's going to be moments where, we have a history of, and I think Lizzie brought this, we have a history of, transgression and issues with our community, but we find a way to heal. We find a way to rise above it. Because we're blessed to be in the situation that we're in, all of us, right? Our families immigrating here, or whatever it is, how we ended up to where we're at. It may not be the brightest path or the smoothest path, but we're here. And I would say just continue to, fight the good fight and continue to lean on one another, because I'm coming from a position where I see the kids and I see the youth, look at each other and say, there's still hope. There's still faith. They still have faith for what's out there. I mean, I'm talking to kids about, having a green school campaign going on. And I'm looking at that, it's like, that seems so far off. And they're just like, no, we have that in mind. We're going to find a way to make sure what we believe is right is going to happen before we get out of school, before we get to your age, Mr. Puth. And I would kind of say channel that same spirit, whatever line work you're in, especially in the line work that a lot of you folks here are watching. You're in the forefront. You're putting your lives out there, and we want to continue to acknowledge that you are, a special group of folks out there working for us. But continue to, have faith that other folks value you guys just as much as you value them. And I'll leave it with this. Well, one of the things that I'm learning, and even though I thought I knew this, the difference between sympathy and empathy, right? I always thought I knew what those two words were and how they are different. But they kept, the kids are teaching me this. Empathy is putting yourself in someone else's shoes, seeing the world from their perspective, and then how can you find a way to relate to that? And I think that's one of the things that is so underrated in our community right now. And I hope that we continue to do that, to build back and heal, like we know we can as a country. And like Dale and I know, as the Lakers did, last year when we won a championship. Sorry, Jonathan. I just have to add that in.
Yeah, just had to get that dig in. Had to get that dig in. All right, Amy. Yes, indeed,
yeah,
indeed.
I'm a hardcore NBA fan too, but I would say it's the Warriors for me.
Oh no! Let's end the stream right now.
You know I'm from LA.
No, that's all good. Go ahead, Amy.
But yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for having me today. It's just been so refreshing and an honor to really be able to discuss this topic. And it just goes to show how important it is to have allyship, to help each other as a community. And I think that this shows like this, Black and Blue, really speaks volumes. And I think one topic that I'm really interested in is how can we increase diversity in law enforcement? I feel like that could be what are the ways, what are the efforts that can be done to increase more people of color in law enforcement? And I think that, like, what can be done as far as that sense? And that's something that has piqued my curiosity, and that's something that I want to leave off with. But in addition to that, I think that it's just important to just keep this momentum going, keep this building awareness going. That's something that I've really worked on for many years, and I'm just really heartened to see the community, the public, really paying attention finally about all of the issues, and in particular racism against the AAPI community that's often been overlooked and seen as invisible many times. So I think that that's great, and I think that just want to leave people off with don't be silent. And don't be a bystander. Speak out, speak up, whether it be you, whether it's for your community, or if you see something in another community, another person of color. I think that it's great to have that community and have that allyship. And I'm just really grateful and really thankful for the opportunity to be here today and to be part of the Black and Blue podcast.
Thank you. We appreciate you. Yeah. Great. Appreciate you coming on. And real quick before we move on to you, Chief Chung, we had a Leslie Cavazos on Facebook says, Jonathan, go Spurs, go. So you got somebody back here backing you there. So just wanted to get that in there for you. You got somebody back up. Is that somebody that you work with? Is that your backup?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Okay. Pretty much. There you go. There's at least 2 Spurs fans in the world. All right. Appreciate that. No, we just messing with you. Spurs are the big fundamental. This Tim Duncan's birthday was today, I believe. So there you go. All right. Yeah. And Chief Chung, last but certainly not least, what do you want to leave our viewers with today?
Well, at first I got to throw down the Warriors and give them a shout out. So that makes it 2-2-2. So I think we're all evenly split at this point.
Yes.
We're at an impasse. No, all the other panelists. Okay. All the other panelists just summed it up really well. I think I would just close with, everyone here and all of your listeners each has a certain amount of influence in their sphere, whether it's at work or whether it's their personal friends, right? And because of that, that's the first step, right? And this ongoing, really important issue in this country of stopping Asian hate, but also racial equity and just having those difficult conversations about the different structures of racism that the country has had, whether it's legislative, whether it's in the history that we have or in practice. Law enforcement's at the forefront of a lot of these discussions, and we're not going to go anywhere from there because we're going to be in those discussions. But I would much rather have those discussions with other institutions, right? Whether it's media, politicians, education, health. We're not going to fix this by just putting it all on the shoulders of law enforcement. That doesn't excuse law enforcement. It just means that we're already at the table. We'd love to have a lot of other people at the table with us. So each of you, your listeners, wherever you're at, whatever influence you have, that's where you start. That's where you start to have these discussions.
Well said. Love that. So I thank all you guys for coming on today with the Black and Blue podcast, Black and Blue Live. Appreciate all you guys' perspectives, what you had to offer for Lizzie and I and our audience as well. So it was great having you. I appreciate each and every last one of you, and be safe. We appreciate you. All right. That was a great conversation, wasn't it? With some real good stuff. Yeah, we got deep in that, didn't we?
Reading and education, and definitely a lot of ally building.
Yes.
That needs to happen on my part.
Yes.
So definitely motivated to, do more. We do stuff, but I want to do more.
Yes.
It's important.
Well, thank you guys for joining us here. Till next time, my name is Dale. That's Lizzie.
This has been a Maitre D Entertainment presentation.